Well, hi guys, Score here, and welcome to Kerbal Space Program. This is my introduction video to Kerbal Space Program. In this video, I'm going to go over the basics of Kerbal. I'm going to give you a brief idea of what it is, what it can do, or rather what you can do with it. And then I'm going to show you how to build a very simple rocket, suborbital rocket. They'll just get us up into the atmosphere and we'll parachute down safely. This is a Kerbin. These are your little astronauts. Cute little guys. You've got to protect them. Try not to kill them, although inevitably you probably will. He's currently stood on Moon. That's spelt M-U-N, and the U has an umlaut on it. This is not Earth. This is in fact Kerbin, and this is Moon. It's roughly the world of Kerbin is roughly based on the solar system, our solar system, in terms of the number of planets, but there are a number of variances in structure, and all the names are completely different. For example, Kerbin, or rather Earth if you like, has two moons. It has Mun and Minmus, whereas Earth only has one. So it's not the same as Earth's solar system, but there are strong familiarities. Kerbin has a gravity level similar to Earth and so on. Anyway, without further ado, let's begin the game and we'll start talking about Kerbal Space Program. First thing you're going to want to do is possibly go through the training, although if you pay attention to what I'm showing you, you won't really need to. So I'm just going to start a new game, and we shall call this one Squirrel Adventures. At the moment there is no career option, there's only a sandbox. Literally this game is not even in full release, but they have a full career mode planned. At the moment you can play with absolutely every part available in the game as you assemble things, and it is pure sandbox. There's nothing to do other than to just play the game and do fun things. Okay, this is where you start. This is the Kerbal Space Center, and as you can see, this is your launch pad over here. This is your space station where you can observe the solar system and look at what things you have in flight. You can have things on the moon. You can have things in orbit, and from here you'll be able to see what's where and just go and jump to it straight away and take control. This is your vehicle assembly building. Well, you have two assembly buildings. This one is for assembling rockets. This one is for assembling aircraft, which you have a runway to take off on. This obviously has the launch pad. We're going to go, this is the flag by the way, you can change this with a mod. We're going to go straight into the vehicle assembly building. Now then, this is the fun part. This is where you get to assemble your rockets, and then out there on the launch pad is where you get to see if they actually take off. These are your little guys running around. They're going to obviously, the scientist and the engineer is going to help you to build your stuff. The first thing that you need when you build any rocket is a top piece or a command pod. This is where your guy is going to sit. Indeed, if the guy is going to sit in there, you can just launch satellites into orbit. You don't need to put a Kerbin inside. But in this particular example, I'm going to use this one here, the Command Pod Mark 1. This is quite a lightweight pod. Our little Kerbin's going to sit in here. It only has room for one guy. Some of the big ones up over here, they have room for 3 people, but they're a lot heavier and will take a much bigger rocket to put it into orbit. So if you click on this, and if you hold the right mouse button down, that will allow you to look around. If you use the mouse wheel, you will go up and down like so, and what you can do is just click on parts and move them around with the mouse, or you can click on them and with the mouse wheel move up and down. You'll notice when I click here you get a little green blob at the top. That's a connection point, so we can attach things to that point there. We can also attach things to the underside. Now the whole point of this capsule is to obviously go out into orbit, and you can re-enter Kerbin's atmosphere with this. It's heat shielded underneath. And you can attach a parachute on top. In fact, that's exactly what we're going to do next, is put a parachute on top, so that as it's coming back through the atmosphere, we can deploy the parachute and safely arrest our velocity and land safely on the surface without killing our little Kerbin. Now then, let's begin to do this. If we go up to here on the top left, you can see you've got your pods, you've got propulsion, which is to do with fuel and rockets, control, which are things that you can put on your rocket to allow them to steer or operate them in 0G. You've got structural. These are very important. There's quite a few things in here, but the notable things are these struts, connection struts, decouplers, stability enhancers, and so on. These are very, very useful. These are almost like the gaffer tape and the glue that when you put your rocket together will make sure it stays together and allow you to detach components as you go through your flight. Aerodynamics is concerned with wings and control surfaces, and finally the utilities are to do with putting wheels on or putting ladders, that kind of thing. Even put rechargeable battery packs on there. And this sciencey bit here it's a little bit of fun at the moment. It's just some sensors. You can largely ignore it for now. If we nip back to utility, down here we have some parachutes. Now you can see that some of the parachutes are quite a bit bigger than what we need. These are designed for the larger command pods. They're too big. So what we're going to do is going to take this one here, sorry, not that one, the Mark 16 parachutes, which will fit nicely on top, and that will be enough to arrest the velocity of this thing as it comes back into Kerbin's atmosphere. Now, what else do we need? Well, of course, we need some propulsion. We need a way of breaking the gravity and the atmosphere of Kerbin. Remember, we're not going to go all the way out of the atmosphere in this run. We're just going to do a test flight, get up into the about something around the 10,000 meter mark before we come back down again and run out of fuel. Speaking of fuel, we need a fuel tank on here. So we don't want solid booster rockets. They're very specific, and I'll explain those in later videos. Nor do we want some of these ginormous fuel tanks. These for taking some of the biggest rockets up. But what we're going to do is remain nice and efficient. We're just going to have a small fuel tank under here. This is the FLT400 fuel tank. It has 180 units of liquid fuel, and that's going to be enough to get us to about 10,000 meters. The other thing we need, of course, underneath is a rocket. Now there are two kinds of rocket here that are going to fit. Well, there are a number of rockets, but with enough engine power, we're going to go for one of these two here. The difference between these two, the T30 and the T45, is the T45 has thrust vectoring. You can see in the middle of the text there, it says engine power 200, and then further down it says thrust vectoring enabled. What's thrust vectoring, I hear you ask? Basically, where the nozzle of the jet comes out, it's movable, so it can actually direct or vector the thrust at an angle. In other words, as it's thrusting, you can steer it at a slight angle, which will then turn the rocket in the direction that you choose. Very, very useful. So we're going to use that one. That's way more than enough power for what we need. We're probably not even going to run it at full throttle when we start taking off. And that's that. That's the command pod with him in, the parachute to land safely, the fuel and the rocket. Is that it? Is that all we need? Well, not quite, because when we're coming into land, we actually want to separate. Once this fuel tank's used, this thrust is no use anymore. This rocket's no use, and we want to detach all of this away from our command pod so that he can land quite safely. The way we do that is with a decoupler. And if you go and look under structural, you will see there are these stack decouplers here. So what you do is you click on your fuel tank, left mouse click, and just move that away. That creates a gap there. We're going to use this one, the TR18A stack decoupler. It's the right size. Click that on there, click on the fuel tank, and reattach. So what have we just done? You may have saw some stuff going on down here, but what we just did was effectively put a separation line between this part of our rocket and this part of our rocket. We will be able to, when we activate this decoupler, it will separate these two parts. When it separates, is controlled by this lot down here. This is the staging area. Now when a rocket goes up into outer space and goes landing on moons and planets, it goes through various stages. There's the launch stage, which is effectively what gets you up and out through the atmosphere. There's a transfer stage, which is what gets you from your current planet over to what it is you're trying to get to. And then there's the landing stage or the orbital stage, depending on what you're doing. You might be landing on a different moon or planet, or you could just be intercepting another space station which is up in orbit and adding to it if you're building a space station. And you can do that in Kerbin. You can have a lot of fun in Kerbin. You can just build your own massive space station in orbit, either around this planet or another one, or you can just go on landings and you can come back again. Yeah, pretty much do whatever you want. Anyway, what's going on down here? So these are the various stages we've got set. You can see this is the lower stage here, number 2, and it only has one thing as I move over it. It's got this, our rocket, our booster, sorry, not our booster, our rocket. This is the lower stage, so that's going to activate first. We go through these stages with the spacebar. Every time we press spacebar, we move up a stage. So our first stage is the rocket. That's going to allow us to take off. When we run out of fuel, we're then going to activate the next stage with the spacebar, which is this one, the decoupler. That will then decouple this part from that part of the rocket. We'll only be left with the command pod and the parachute. And the final stage, if you like, when we press spacebar, is to activate this parachute. We'll only do that last as we're coming back down to the surface. That is pretty much all we need. If we just click the top here and scroll the mouse wheel, make sure it's on the ground. Make sure that you can see the shadow there. If I hold the right mouse button down, use the shadow to determine where you are. The reason you do this is because when we go to the launch pad, it will start off at whatever height we chose in the assembly building, which, you know, if you're up in the air, it'll just suddenly drop to the ground and explode into a ball of fire. Explosions can be fun, I have to say. But we've only got one more thing to do, and that is to name our spacecraft. So we're going to call this the Squirrel Mini Rocket. A very, very dull name. Hope you come up with a much better one. Hit the save button. That's saved it. If all hell breaks loose, we can just click load and load it back later and modify the design. But that should be enough. Let's go to the launch pad and talk about launching. Right, now there are some very important concepts that you need to understand if you're going to make this any kind of a success and not just land yourself in a ball of flames. The first thing to know is this. We are currently facing north. You always start facing north. If you look to your immediate left, there is the assembly building, and that is west. And this obviously means that's east. Why is that important? It's not important for this particular flight, but it is when we want to go into orbit. The reason is when we go into orbit, we'll take off and we'll start heading east later on. That is the same direction that Kerbal is spinning, and that will help us to get into orbit. You don't need to worry about that in this video, but you will need to worry about that if you want to make it into orbit. Now then, let's talk about some of the controls that we can see. This is the nav ball. This is a very, very important thing. You will use this all of the time. What is it showing me? Well, it's current. You can only see the blue side at the moment. The other half of this is a kind of orangey brown. What this represents is the sky, and the nav ball is currently pointing exactly upwards. Okay, so it's like we're looking at the rocket exactly like that. In other words, to our right here is east, and that 90-degree line there, that one, that's the eastern line. Again, not terribly important for this flight, but will be later. Just remember it for now. The earlier you start learning these concepts, the easier things are going to get later. So our rocket is currently facing directly upwards to the sky, and that is shown by this nav ball. And that's fine, that'll do. Up the left side here is the throttle. We can press the left shift key to increase throttle all the way up to 100%. Press the control key to bring it back down, and if you want to kill the throttle completely, press the X key. Shift up, control down, X to zero your throttle. That obviously controls the thrust. The reason it's not working yet is because I have not activated the first stage with the spacebar. So the rocket is not yet active, the thrust does nothing. Up this side here is the G-force. This is the G-force that's not only our Kerbal is experiencing. You can see our little Kerbal down there. He just gave us a little wave. We've currently got Jebediah Kerbal. There's a few different guys, but we're currently running with Jebediah. Jebediah is one of the more experienced Kerbals, I find, in the flight. Not that these guys have any control whatsoever, but Jebediah is a well-known Kerbal in the world of Kerbal Space Program. G-force not only affects this guy, it will affect the structure of your rocket. If you put it through too much G-force and it's not assembled well enough, it will just disintegrate. If you if you click on this here, this shows you a couple of things. It shows you your surface velocity. When you click on it, it shows you your orbital velocity. We'll cover that lot later. Up at the top here, we have the altitude. Now you'll see we're currently running at 72 meters. Remember that's 72 meters from sea level. The sea is just over there out of sight, but we are just above sea level by 72 meters. Very important to keep your eye on the altitude when you're ascending and descending. When you're obviously in space, it doesn't mean anything at all. This is the atmosphere. You can see it's the little arrow on the right there is currently we're at ground level and we're full atmosphere. As we start to rise, the atmosphere will thin until ultimately when we get to about here, we enter space because there is no longer a Kerbin atmosphere. At that point we have no resistance and we'll experience no gravity, or 0 G. Well, I say that's not strictly true. What I mean is we will experience gravity because Kerbin will be trying to pull us towards it all the time, but we'll effectively be spinning around friction free, and as we move away we'll then experience no gravity at all. That is really just an atmosphere or resistance indicator. Drag in Kerbal Space Program doesn't appear to be modelled too much at the moment, so it doesn't matter if you build your aircraft too non-aerodynamic, because you don't get a huge amount of resistance even if you do, but I believe they're going to tidy that up later, so always try and make your rocket as aerodynamic as possible because you should. Okay, we're not going to worry about this down here. This is the pitch, yaw and roll. This is our docking and orbital views. If you press M, that brings up the map. Now as you can see, there is our rocket sat on the launch pad. Now cannily enough, and this is a neat trick, the Space Center is sat on the equatorial line. You can see this line here. This is the orbital path of Moon, and Moon revolves directly around the equator. So what this means is when we take off, if we head in an easterly direction, we shall be spinning, we shall invoke a spin around Kerbin in the same direction that Kerbin is spinning, and that's why we take off to the east, because we'll actually get some help from the planet. It's already orbiting us in that direction anyway, and that's why I said to you before it's important to take off and head east. We don't need to worry about that too much, but if you scroll all the way out, you'll get to see there's Moon there. As we go a bit further, there's Minmus. That's another moon part of Kerbin. So that's Kerbin's planetary bodies, and as we zoom out completely, you can see Kerbin's orbital path around the Sun, which is called Kerbos. And as we come back out again, you can see all of the other planets that are orbiting Kerbos. Out here we've got Joule, we've got Elo, and so on. We're not going to worry about these in this video at all, not one bit. We're just going to come straight back down, press M to get out of the map. I just thought to give you a quick overview. You can visit all these planets, you can go all over that solar system in all kinds of vehicles, and this is just rockets. You wait till we get to aircraft over there and you can start building VTOL lunar sections and God knows what else. Right, let's get this thing up into the upper atmosphere, and then we'll come back down. I'll show you how to do a safe landing. So the first thing first is press the space bar. The rocket is now active. You can see the fuel level is now shown. As we press the shift key, the throttle is going to come up and we will start to ascend. Let's do it. Off we go. Keep your eye on the surface velocity here. Once this gets up to about 140, start to throttle back. We don't want this to go too much over about 150, mostly because we're just wasting fuel at that point as we battle with the atmosphere. You notice the rocket started to tilt, and you can see the nav bars moving. I'm using the keys, the WASD keys. W will obviously send me to the east, Q to the west. The S key brings us back up. Don't worry too much about getting yourself in a spin, as I'm doing here. It really doesn't matter at this stage. There are ways to control this later, which I'll show you. All we're trying to do at this point, so throttle back a bit more, is get some height to about 10,000 meters. As you can see, that yellow, you may be wondering what that yellow is. That's our prograde. That is currently where our rocket is heading, if you like. So what we want to do is try and get that to about the top there, which is 0 degrees heading. We've run out of fuel. We are now literally just flying on our own velocity. If you press the M key and zoom in, you can see our path. So this is us taking off. We've now run out of fuel. We're just being subject to Kerbin's gravity. Our gravity is going to take us up here and back down there into the water. This is the Apoapsis. You'll come to loathe and hate the Apoapsis. The Apoapsis is the furthest point on our arc away from Kerbin. As you can see, we've passed it, so we should now be descending at the top here at altitude 16,000 meters, and we're falling back down straight into the sea. We can move the rocket around, but there's not a lot else we can do. Since we're out of fuel, we can't help but fall back. So let's go into the middle stage, press the space, and you'll see these two sections detach. There we go. That's now going to fall back straight into the space center. We're not going to be popular by doing that, but don't worry too much. If you press the keys, you can see you've got some control. Jebediah seems to be having a laugh with that. He quite likes being spun around for some reason. But let's keep our eye on the altitude here. We are falling back at a hell of a velocity, 250 meters per second. That's enough to kill Jebediah. So I'm going to press the space bar now, deploy the parachute. That's going to do a couple of things. It's going to keep us in a vertical path. We can't now spin around too much. It'll just settle back down again. At about 500 meters, the full parachute's going to deploy. I'm going to scroll the mouse wheel back so that you can see that. And we're going to land back into the sea, which is fine. We can land in the sea or the land. It just doesn't matter. We've reduced our surface velocity, but when we get to 500 meters, the full parachute will deploy, and that will bring Jebediah back down at a safe velocity. So for now, we can just look around and enjoy the view. And yes, as I say, in later videos, we're going to basically build up that rocket enough to get us into orbit. I'll show you how to get into orbit, circularize your orbit, and then how to get back down to the atmosphere safely. So we're at 500. I didn't do anything. The parachute just deployed itself. And we've got to wait for it to land. Now, up here is the time warp. The time warp is your friend. As you can imagine, traveling through space does take an awfully long time. So what the time warp lets you do is accelerate time. Now, because we're in the atmosphere of Kerbin, when we try to accelerate time, it will do what's called a real-time acceleration, which is different to a time warp. A real-time acceleration, it'll calculate the physics as it goes along. And if you press the full stop key, you'll see time starts to speed up, and as we press the comma, it starts to slow down again. Speed up, slow down. You can only go to about 4 notches on that when you're in real time. When you get into outer space, time warp will let you go up to, I think it's about 1,000 times. So that's useful when you're obviously going to completely different planets and moons that are very far away and going to take you days to get there. It'll let you just accelerate and get there in a matter of minutes. And touchdown. Jebediah is now safely back in the water. Some guy's going to come and rescue him at some point. We could get out and have a walk around in the sea, but I'm not going to do that. Press the escape key and click end flight. Are you sure you want to end this flight? Yes. And it will tell you what happened during the flight. So we had liftoff, we had separation of stage 2 confirmed, the fuel engine splashdown harden was destroyed. That's not important right now because we're only in a sandbox mode, so it's not going to cost us anything. But later on, when they introduce career mode, you're going to want to salvage equipment back again as much as possible. So we probably find ourselves putting parachutes on our fuel stages so they would safely descend back down to the surface and we could reclaim them. You can see the stack decoupler splashed down and was destroyed, and then the fuel tank splashed down as well. That splashed down along with the fuel engine. We touched down. We reached 16,000 meters in altitude. We experienced 3.4 Gs, so poor Jebediah had a pretty good ride. You don't want to go through more Gs than that. But other than that, we landed safely. So let's go back to the assembly building. So before I end this video, and in the next video I'm going to start showing you how to get into orbit, but before I do that, let's just have a look at some of the spacecraft that you can build. Just to give you an idea the kind of stuff that you can do. Now here's a rocket. This is a stock rocket that comes with Kerbin. This is a multi-stage rocket, and what its aim is to put this satellite up into orbit. Now I could just use that and show you how to put the satellite into orbit, but I feel it would be better if we built our own rocket, because you'll learn how to put things together in symmetry and all the different sections that you need, and it's much better to learn by example that way. Let's have a look at something else. The ion-powered space probe, as you can see. A little space probe, which has its own built-in fuel cells. Quite cool. It's got its radio antenna on top. Again, you just put these things into space for now. They don't do an awful lot. It's just fun to be able to do it. But later on in the game, I think they'll change all of that. Should we have a look at one more? Rocket and Sky Rover. Yeah, look at this. This thing has little jet nozzles on it. This is built for obviously going across the surface. But also these engines are probably powerful enough to lift this thing vertically off the ground so it could hover. Ultimately cool. It's powered by solar power here. Look at that. So that's the kind of cool stuff you can do. Now, let's nip over to the flight center. Let me just click on something here. Click load. Let me show you something really cool. The rocket-powered VTOL. I've got to show you this. Look at this. This is hilarious. This thing has those jets I was talking to you about. But let's go to launch. Let's just show you this. Okay, so you start off on the runway like this, and obviously the first stage. Press pretty loud. Press the space bar, and these rockets are now engaged. If we press the shift key, you can see we're powering up, and once we get enough thrust, we have vertical takeoff. It's starting to fall backwards because the guy who built it didn't balance it properly. But if we hold the W key, throttle down a little bit, as you can see, press the W key, we can just about keep this thing in a forward position. What you'd want to do, and I'll show you how to do this later, what you'd want to do, the reason this thing's tipping back is because the centre of gravity is not in the middle, it's further to the back, so it has a tendency to fall backwards all the time. I think we're going to crash. Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit! There you go. There's a very important lesson right there, okay? When you build a ship, you've got to balance it. When you end up with an imbalance, it starts to fall. When it starts to fall, it becomes hard to control. And when it's hard to control, that's what happens. But we'll not worry about that too much. Back to the spaceplane hangar for a sec while I show you something else. Let's click on load. What else have we got here? We've got the Raven Spear Mark IV. Okay, so there you go. Super cool looking. How awesome is that? You can put your own ladders on the side so your Kerbin can get in and out. But does that look space age or what? I mean, seriously. Let's load something else up here. The Albatross 3. That is just epic. This is the kind of thing you can do in Kerbal Space Program. It is a complete sandbox game, and you build things from Lego components. But here's the kicker, and I haven't even touched on this subject yet. These are just the default components that you get with Kerbal. But Kerbal's an open game. It's completely moddable. And the mod market for this has exploded. There are so many mods that you can download from the Kerbal Spaceport. It's unbelievable what you can do. People have built weapon systems, rockets, lasers, all kinds of thrusts. They've even built computer components that will calculate all of the orbits for you. A product called MechJeb. When I show you how to play this game, I'm going to show you how to get into orbit and navigate your way to the moon and back, and to Minmus and back. I'm going to show you how to do it the hard way. I think that's the best thing to do, is to learn how to do it and learn the principles behind it, because there are some fairly complicated orbital mechanics that you need to learn. But once you understand them, and you will, because I'll explain them to you, once you understand them, you'll be able to do anything you want. And if you then choose to go and use MechJeb, which just does all of it, it's just like an autopilot. You just say, I want to go here into orbit, you know, I want to land, and it'll just do all the maths for you and make it super efficient. And that's fine. You can play the game that way, but I'll probably switch to MechJeb later when we just start to assemble some crazy things. But for now, I'd rather you guys understand how to do it, if you like, the hard way. Let's just jump back to the vehicle assembly building and show you some of the rockets that were in there. Kerbal X. There you go, look at this. How cool is this? This actually has a technique on it. I built this one. This has a technique on it called Asparagus Staging. So what happens is, and I'm briefly going to touch on this now, but I will explain it later, is this fuel and thrust here is connected to this one. So the fuel from here gets used in the thrust, and it also pours fuel into the next one. You can see that little yellow fuel line there. So that feeds that feeds that one, and that feeds the central one. And the net result of that is a super efficient way of taking off, which I'll just very quickly show you now. Let it settle down. Let's throttle up. Get the rockets up. Build up some thrust. Release. Now watch the fuel here. You see that these two outer rockets are depleting much quicker than these two, which is depleting quicker than the central ones. When these go, watch what happens. There you go. So press the spacebar. That releases those two. These two, the next two along, are now burning gas quicker than these, and this one's burning quicker than the central one. So when these two run out, I detach these two. What we're doing is we're getting rid of weight that we don't need anymore. See? In a second we'll end up with our final two. Let's just straighten this thing back up again. Asparagus staging was invented back in the 60s or 50s, I can't remember. By a very clever man. A very efficient way of taking off. And there you go. So we've reached a height of 5,500 meters, and we've lost an awful lot of our weight. Cool, huh? Anyway, the other stages in this rocket are... Oh, there's a parachute. Yeah, looks like I've got some problems to debug there, because that should have released that. In fact, I think it did. I think what's happened is... I know what's happened. We're still joined because the rocket is pushing these two pieces together. We're supposed to be in 0G before we separate them. Anyway, let's just end that flight right there. Okay, so finally we've got the tracking station, as I said. If you had things in orbit or on the various planets, the tracking station would show them all here, and you'd be able to see, you know, how many probes you've got across the top, rovers, landers, ship stations, bases, EVAs and flags. So we can see all the bits of crap that we've left lying around, like that. That's still on the space launch pad. Not terribly exciting right now, but it will be much more exciting later. Anyway, I hope that's given you a very brief overview of Kerbal Space Program. It is a super cool game, and unfortunately, once you get used to it, it's going to suck your time away like a black hole. It's deeply addictive, and as you can see here, the spaceport, that takes you to the website where all the mods are. I'm going to play it vanilla. I suggest you do too. There's plenty to explore in the vanilla mode. And future videos, next one's going to be about orbiting. The one after that, we're going to go to Minmus and back. And then we'll start working on our own space station and our own base on maybe Minmus or possibly on the moon. And we'll start getting into some aircraft. So lots more videos to show you. But if you want to go and get this game, go and get it. It's available on Steam. It's worth every single penny. You will have a tremendous amount of fun. But trust me, there's a bit of a learning curve to go through. Anyway, that's all, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. Please give me a thumbs up if you did. Take care. See you soon.